I'm Liam. I'm 29 years old, and my own father destroyed 2 years of my life's work right in front of me with a smirk on his face. Before I tell you how a single button pressed that night changed everything, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's good to know you're out there. The party was supposed to be a celebration, my cousin's graduation, but for me it felt like walking into a well-set trap. The air was thick with the scent of chlorine from the pool and barbecue smoke, a classic American summer combination that usually felt like home. But not that day. That day it felt suffocating. My parents, Robert and Eleanor, had been cornering me for weeks. They had a new business venture, a phrase that sent a cold shiver down my spine every time I heard it. It was always a new venture, a new can't-miss opportunity that required a significant investment from my savings. This time, the magic number was $139,000. I'd already said no, politely at first, then firmly. I was a game developer, an indie developer to be exact. I didn't have a big studio behind me. Everything I earned came from years of coding, designing, and pouring my soul onto a screen. My latest project, my magnum opus, was on the laptop I carried with me everywhere. It was my life. At the party, my father cornered me by the poolside. He had that look in his eye, a mix of feigned charm and entitlement. "Son," he began, slinging an arm around my shoulder. "We need to talk about that coffee shop. It's a sure thing." "Dad, I've given you my answer," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I can't." His smile tightened. "Can't or won't. You make plenty of money from those little computer games of yours. $139,000 is a drop in the bucket for you, but it's life-changing for us." Pulled away. "My little computer games paid off your last failed business. And the one before that." The answer is no. That's when he saw it. My laptop, sitting on the poolside table where I'd left it for just a moment. The whole world seemed to slow down. He walked over, picked it up, and for a split second, I thought he was going to threaten me with it. But he did something worse. He turned, looked me straight in the eye, and let it slip from his fingers. It hit the water with a sickening splash that echoed in the sudden silence of the party. "Oh, sorry," he said, the smirk never leaving his face. "I accidentally dropped your laptop in the pool." "Oops, just an accident." My mother rushed over, not to me, but to his side. She placed a placating hand on his arm. "It's just an accident, Liam. These things happen." I looked around. 15 family members stood there, frozen, watching. Not a single person said a word. Not my uncles, not my aunts, not my cousins. Their silence was a verdict. I was alone. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange, cold calm washed over me. I looked at my father's smirking face, my mother's false sympathy, and the silent jury of my family. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Or maybe it was finally pieced together. I turned and walked away without a word, the sound of the party slowly fading behind me. They didn't know it yet, but they hadn't just dropped a laptop in a pool. They had declared war, and I was about to launch my first and final counterattack. To understand why a grown man would destroy his son's livelihood over a loan, you have to understand my family's religion. And that religion had only one God, my older brother, Ethan. Ethan was the golden child. He was 32, worked in finance, had a corner office downtown, or so we were told, and wore suits that cost more than my rent. He was the one whose picture was framed on the mantelpiece, front and center. My picture was on a side table, slightly obscured by a lamp. Growing up, everything was a competition I was destined to lose. His report cards were taped to the fridge. Mine were met with a cursory, "That's nice, dear." When he made the varsity football team, my father bought a season pass and never missed a game. When I won my first coding competition at 16, my father looked at the trophy and asked, "So, what's this for? Can you make any money with it?" It was a constant, grinding devaluation of everything I was. My passion for creating worlds, for telling stories through code and art, was just a hobby. It wasn't a real job like Ethan's. I remember one Thanksgiving I was about 22. I had just released my first indie game. It wasn't a blockbuster, but it had a small, dedicated following. It had earned me a few $1,000s, enough to prove that this path was viable. I was buzzing with pride and brought my laptop to show everyone. "Look," I said, pointing to the screen. "These are players from Germany, Japan. They're talking about the characters I created." My mother glanced over. "Oh, that's interesting. Ethan, tell your aunt about your promotion. He's a vice president now, you know." Ethan, leaning back in his chair with a self-satisfied smile, soaked it all in. He caught my eye and gave me a little wink. A wink that said, "You and your little games. Cute." The sting of that dismissal never really went away. It became the background noise of my life. I poured all that frustration, all that feeling of being unseen, into my work. My games became more complex, the stories deeper. My second title won an industry award, something akin to an Oscar for indie games. I called my parents to tell them the news. "That's great, son," my dad said, his voice distant. I could hear the TV blaring in the background. "Hey, listen, while I have you on the phone, Ethan's car is in the shop. He needs a couple $1,000 to cover the repairs. Think you can help your brother out?" It was always like that. My successes were not achievements to be celebrated. They were resources to be tapped. My growing salary wasn't a testament to my hard work. It was a deeper well from which the family could draw. They never understood that my work wasn't just a job. It was the one place where I felt valued, where my creations mattered. The worlds I built were my refuge from the world they lived in. A world where I was always second best. Always the supporting character in the Ethan show. That laptop my father dropped into the pool wasn't just a piece of hardware. It was my refuge. It was my validation. It was the one place I existed on my own terms. And he had violated it casually, cruelly, to remind me of my place. To remind me that in their eyes, my entire world was worth less than their latest whim. He thought he was just destroying a machine. He had no idea he was finally setting me free from the shadow I'd lived in my entire life. The financial bleeding started subtly. It always does. It began after college with small requests. "Can you spot me $100 for groceries? I'll get you back on Friday. The electric bill is a little high this month. Can you chip in?" It was easy to say yes. They were my parents. But the small chips became gaping holes. My father, Robert, was a dreamer of the worst kind. He didn't dream of creating or contributing. He dreamed of get-rich-quick schemes. There was the gourmet hot dog stand that lasted 2 months and left him with a $5,000 debt for a custom-built cart. I paid it off. Then there was the landscaping business, which failed after he underbid a massive contract and realized he'd have to pay his workers more than he was earning. I covered the payroll so those men could feed their families. He never thanked me. He just complained about the unreliable market. The biggest one, before the coffee shop idea, was the pressure washing business. He saw a YouTube ad and was convinced he'd be a millionaire in a year. He needed $35,000 for a top-of-the-line truck and equipment. He, Eleanor, and Ethan launched a full-court press. There were phone calls, guilt trips, and family meetings that were just interventions aimed at my wallet. "It's an investment in your father's happiness, Liam," my mother would say, her voice dripping with emotional blackmail. "Come on, man, it's for Dad." Ethan would chime in, "Don't be selfish." So I gave it to them. I drained a significant portion of my savings, the money I had set aside for a down payment on a small house. I told myself it was the last time. The business folded in 6 months. He sold the equipment for a fraction of the cost, and the money just vanished. He never paid me back a single dime. When I cautiously brought it up, he got defensive. "Are you really going to nickel and dime your own father? After all I've done for you?" What he had done for me, I was beginning to realize, was raise me to be his personal safety net. By the time the party happened, I wasn't just covering his failed business debts. I had become the silent, unacknowledged provider for their entire lifestyle. It had crept up on me. It started when their mortgage payment was late, and my mom called me, crying about the possibility of foreclosure. So I set up an auto-pay, $2,400 a month, right out of my account. Then their car insurance was about to lapse. "We can't risk driving without it, honey. What if something happened?" So I added them to my plan. $320 a month. Internet and cable TV. Streaming services. Their family phone plan. It all went on my credit card. It amounted to about $3,300 a month. That's nearly $40,000 a year. I was paying the mortgage on a house I didn't live in, for parents who barely respected my existence. And through it all, there was never a thank you. Not once. My support was expected, assumed. It was my duty as the son who got lucky with his little computer games. They saw my income not as the result of sleepless nights and thousands of hours of intense, creative labor, but as a lottery win that they were entitled to a piece of. They lived comfortably, taking vacations I couldn't afford and buying things they didn't need, all while I was working 70-hour weeks. The irony was suffocating. I was funding a life I had no time to live, for people who saw me as nothing more than a recurring deposit. That laptop contained the project that was supposed to be my final push, the one that would give me enough security to finally cut the cord. And my father had just drowned it in chlorine. "You have to stop, Liam." It was Chloe, my best friend and creative partner. We were in our shared workspace, a small rented office that always smelled faintly of coffee and overworked computers. The whiteboard behind her was covered in character sketches and plot diagrams for Meridian Cycle, our massive project. She was the one person who saw the full extent of the madness. She just overheard a phone call between me and my mother. It was the weekly guilt trip call, a masterfully passive-aggressive performance where Eleanor would list all their financial woes without ever directly asking for money, forcing me to offer it instead. "She's playing you," Chloe said, her arms crossed. She had a no-nonsense attitude that I both admired and feared. They all are. This isn't support, it's an infestation. "She's just stressed, Chloe," I argued, the words tasting like lies even as I said them. "Dad's ventures. They take a toll." "Dad's ventures?" She scoffed, her eyes flashing. "You mean the black holes you keep throwing your money into? Liam, your father is a financial leech, and your mother is the one holding you down so he can suck you dry. And Ethan? He's the cheerleader, egging them on because as long as they're focused on you, nobody's looking too closely at him." Her words were harsh, but they were true. I knew they were true. Every time I transferred money, a part of me screamed in protest. But the weight of family obligation, of a lifetime of conditioning to seek their approval, was like a physical restraint. "What am I supposed to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "They'll be on the street. It's my parents." "No, they won't," she countered, her voice softening slightly. "Your mother has a job. Your father is a grown man who can get a job like anyone else. They have options. They just prefer the easiest one, which is you. You are their path of least resistance." She walked over and tapped the screen of my monitor, where a beautifully rendered fantasy cityscape was taking shape. "This is your future, Liam. Don't you see? Every dollar you give them is a brick you're stealing from this. From your own life. You need to set boundaries. A real boundary, not a suggestion." I knew she was right. Intellectually, I understood everything she was saying. But emotionally, I was trapped. I was terrified of the fallout. The anger, the accusations of being a bad son. The potential of being completely cut off. A part of me, a small, wounded child inside, still thought that if I just gave enough, did enough, they would finally turn around and say, "We're proud of you." "I'll talk to them," I promised, both to her and to myself. "The next time they ask for something big, I'll say no. I promise." Chloe just looked at me with sad, knowing eyes. "I hope you do, Liam. I really do. Because I don't know how much more of this you can take before there's nothing left." That conversation happened about a month before the party. I had promised to say no to the next big ask. And I did. I said no to the $139,000. I just never could have predicted the price of that no would be the very future Chloe had warned me I was giving away. She was right. There was almost nothing left. But almost is a powerful word. The big ask came on a Tuesday. My mother called, her voice buzzing with an artificial excitement that immediately set my teeth on edge. "Liam, honey, your father has the most wonderful news," she chirped. It's going to change everything for us. I leaned back in my chair, already feeling the exhaustion creep in. Oh yeah? What is it this time? It's a franchise opportunity, she said, drawing out the word opportunity, as if it were made of gold. A high-end coffee kiosk, one of those ones with the fancy Italian machines. It's going to be in the lobby of that new office building downtown. The foot traffic is incredible. It's a guaranteed success. I stayed silent, letting her fill the void. We have the business plan already, she continued, her voice speeding up. We've spoken to the franchise owners. They love your father's passion. There's just one small hurdle: the franchise fee and the initial equipment cost. It's a one-time investment to secure our future. Here it comes, I thought. The hammer was about to fall. How much? I asked, my voice flat. There was a slight pause. $139,000, she said, saying it quickly as if hoping I wouldn't notice the number of zeros. I almost laughed. It was absurd. After the pressure washer disaster, after everything, they had the audacity to ask for a sum that could change a person's life. Mom, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. I don't have that kind of money just lying around. Of course you do, sweetie, she countered immediately, her cheerful tone becoming strained. Chloe told me your last game did wonderfully, and you've been working on this new one for so long. It's bound to be a hit. Think of this as an investment for the whole family. A rising tide lifts all boats, you know. My last investment in Dad's business is currently rusting in a storage unit somewhere, I reminded her. I need to see a real business plan. Market analysis, projected profits, breakdown of costs. Everything. This was my new boundary. No more blind faith. I wanted cold, hard facts. The silence on the other end of the line was telling. Well, your father has all of that, of course, she stammered. It's very detailed. He can walk you through it. But I knew there was no plan. There never was. There was only a dream, an amount, and a target, me. Email it to me, I said. I'm not discussing this any further until I have a professional business plan in my inbox. I could feel her frustration through the phone. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. I was supposed to protest a little, then she would apply the guilt, and I would eventually cave. My demand for something as simple as a document had thrown her off completely. Liam, this is about trusting your family, she said, her voice turning cold. Sometimes you just have to have a little faith. I have faith, I replied, my own voice hardening. But faith doesn't pay the bills. The bank learned that from Dad, and so did I. Send me the plan. I hung up before she could reply. My heart was pounding. I had done it. I had set a boundary. For a moment, I felt a surge of pride, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of dread. I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of the storm. The plan, of course, never arrived. What arrived instead was the cavalry. My parents didn't believe in fighting fair. They believed in overwhelming force. The first call was from Ethan. It came the next day while I was deep in a coding session. Hey, little brother, he started, his voice dripping with condescension. Mom tells me you're giving them a hard time. I asked for a business plan, Ethan. That's not giving them a hard time. That's being a responsible investor, I said, my fingers still hovering over my keyboard. He laughed. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound. Investor? Don't kid yourself. You're their son. This is about family, not spreadsheets. What do you know about real business anyway? You just sit in a dark room and play with cartoons all day. A hot wire pulled tight in my chest. My cartoons pay for their mortgage. And last I checked, they paid for your last business trip to Vegas, too. The line went quiet for a beat. That was different, he said, his voice clipped. Look, just give them the money. It's the right thing to do. Stop being a selfish brat. He hung up. The word selfish echoed in my head. Was it selfish to protect my own future? Was it selfish to not want to see my life's work flushed down another one of my father's toilets of failure? The next wave came from my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. She was the family's designated emotional manipulator. She called that evening, her voice soft and full of concern. Liam dear, she cooed. Your mother is so upset. She feels like you don't trust them. Your father is just trying to build something for their retirement, a little inheritance to leave for you and your brother. You have to understand the pressure he's under. I understand it perfectly, Aunt Carol, I said, my patience wearing thin. That's why I'd like to see the plan to make sure this investment is sound. Oh, you men and your plans, she tittered dismissively. This is about the heart. A family helps each other. You wouldn't want anything to happen to them, would you? They're not getting any younger. It was a veiled threat, wrapped in a sugary coating of concern. Give us the money, or you'll be responsible for their decline. The calls kept coming. An uncle who I hadn't spoken to in a year called to tell me about the importance of honoring thy father and mother. A cousin texted me, saying he heard I was doing really well, and that it was cool that I could help out my parents like that. It was a coordinated campaign of guilt, shame, and pressure, all designed to wear me down. The breaking point came when I was on the phone with my mother again. She was crying this time, or at least making sounds that resembled crying. I just don't know what we did wrong, she sobbed. We raised you to be a good, caring son. As she was talking, I heard a click on the line. She was on the house phone, and I could faintly hear another voice in the background. It was Aunt Carol. My mother must have accidentally hit a button. Just keep at it, Eleanor, Carol was saying. He's stubborn, but he's got a soft spot. You just have to make him feel guilty enough. He'll crack. He always does. My blood ran cold. I felt the air leave my lungs. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my mother being coached on how to manipulate me. It wasn't about stress or need. It was a calculated performance. A con. I sipped my coffee, the bitter taste matching the one in my mouth. I stayed silent, letting them think I hadn't heard. Liam? Are you there, honey? My mother asked, her voice instantly switching back to distraught. I'm here, Mom, I said, my own voice eerily calm. I need to go. We'll talk about this at Kevin's graduation party on Saturday. Oh, you will? Hope surged in her voice. You'll reconsider? I'll give you my final answer then, I said, and hung up. They thought I was cracking. They thought their strategy was working. They had no idea that they had just armed me with something far more powerful than guilt. The cold, hard truth. The family meeting on Saturday wasn't going to be my surrender. It was going to be my declaration of independence. The air at the party was thick with unspoken expectations. As soon as I arrived, I felt the weight of dozens of eyes on me. I was no longer Liam, the cousin, or the nephew. I was the walking, talking bank account, and everyone was waiting to see if the vault would open. My parents cornered me almost immediately, their smiles wide and predatory. So, son, my father started, clapping me on the back a little too hard. Have you had a chance to think things over? We're so excited, my mother added, touching my arm. Your father has already been picking out espresso machines. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I had been dreading and preparing for all week. I looked past them, at my brother Ethan who was watching us from across the lawn, a smug look on his face. I saw my Aunt Carol giving my mom a subtle nod of encouragement. They were a pack of wolves and they were closing in for the kill. Yes, I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through their charade. I have thought about it, and the answer is no. The smiles vanished. My father's face hardened, the folksy charm evaporating to reveal the cold, hard anger beneath. My mother's eyes widened in disbelief. What do you mean, no? My father demanded, his voice low and dangerous. I mean no, I repeated. I am not giving you $139,000. I am not funding another one of your failed ventures. It's over. After everything we've done for you? My mother gasped, placing a hand on her chest in a gesture of pure theater. This is how you repay us? Repay you for what? I shot back, a decade of resentment finally bubbling to the surface. For treating me like a second-class son my entire life until you realized I could be your personal ATM? For ignoring every achievement, belittling my career, and only ever calling when you need something? What exactly am I repaying you for? A small crowd was gathering. My words were hanging in the air, sharp and undeniable. My father took a step closer, his face turning red. "You watch your mouth. You make plenty of money from your art books. $139,000 is nothing to you, but it's life-changing for me." "It's nothing to me?" I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "That nothing represents years of my life. Years of working while you were dreaming up new ways to lose money." "My money?" "The answer is no, Dad. It is a complete sentence." And that's when he saw it. The laptop, my whole life sitting on that poolside table. His eyes locked onto it, and a truly terrifying, chilling smile spread across his face. It wasn't a smile of humor. It was a smile of destruction. He knew exactly what it was, and he knew exactly how to hurt me in the most profound way possible. He walked over, his movements deliberate. He picked it up. He held my gaze, and he dropped it. The splash was the only sound in a world that had gone completely silent. "Oh, sorry," he said, the venom dripping from his fake apology. "I accidentally dropped your laptop in the pool." "Oops, just an accident." My mother, right on cue, rushed to his side. "It's just an accident, Liam. These things happen. You should back things up better." They stood there, a united front of casual cruelty. They had played their final card. They had shown me, in front of the entire family, exactly how little I meant to them. They expected me to scream, to cry, to break down. But I didn't. I just stood there, the cold calm washing over me. I looked into their eyes and I saw them for what they truly were. And I knew with absolute certainty what I had to do next. I turned my back on them, on all of it, and walked away. The war was over. It was time to salt the earth. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember the traffic or the route I took. My mind was a silent, white-hot engine of pure focus. There was no rage, no tears. That would come later. Right now, there was only the mission. I walked into my apartment and the silence was a welcome relief. I went straight to my office, my sanctuary. For a terrifying moment, I stared at the empty space on my desk where my laptop should have been, and a wave of nausea hit me. 2 years. 5,000 hours of my life. Was it all gone? Then I remembered. The cloud. My off-site backups. My hands trembled as I powered up my old desktop computer. It roared to life like an ancient beast. I logged into my cloud storage, my heart hammering against my ribs. And there it was. Meridian cycle_backup_yesterday. I clicked it open. The files were there. The character models, the storyboards, the thousands of lines of code. I had lost a day's work, maybe 2. Not 2 years. A choked sob of relief escaped my lips. It was the first sound I had made in hours. My father's ultimate act of destruction had been neutered by a simple, automated process he couldn't even comprehend. The relief was so immense, so overwhelming, that it instantly morphed into something else. Cold, hard resolve. He tried to take everything. He failed. Now it was my turn. It was just after midnight. I sat down at my desk, opened a spreadsheet, and began my work. It was methodical, clinical. A series of 1,000 tiny, deliberate clicks, each one severing a financial artery. First, the mortgage. I logged into my bank account. I found the recurring monthly payment of $2,400 to their mortgage company. The words "Cancel future payments" glowed on the screen. I clicked. A confirmation box popped up. "Are you sure?" I clicked yes without a moment's hesitation. One down. Next, the car insurance. A quick call to my insurance company's 24-hour line. I navigated the automated menu. To remove a driver from your policy, press 3. I pressed 3. I confirmed their names and vehicle information. "The changes will be effective immediately," the robotic voice informed me. 2 down. The family phone plan. That was on my account, too. I logged into the carrier's website. I saw my name, and below it, Robert, Eleanor, and Ethan. I ported my number to a new individual plan. Then I initiated the cancellation for the other 3 lines. Their service would be cut off at the end of the billing cycle. In 2 days. 3 down. Internet and cable TV. Click. Cancelled. All the streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max click. Click, click, canceled. I went through my credit card statements, hunting down every single recurring charge I paid for them. Each one was a link in the chain that bound me to them. And with every click, I felt a link break. I felt lighter. The final step was the most important. I drafted a letter to their mortgage company. I stated clearly that I was not a co-signer on their loan, had no legal responsibility for their mortgage, and that any payments I had made were voluntary gifts which had now ceased. I would have my lawyer send a formal copy in the morning. This was to protect myself from the fallout I knew was coming. 3 a.m. I was done. I took a single piece of paper and wrote a short note. My handwriting was perfectly steady. Oops. Looks like I accidentally canceled some things. Just a small mistake. These things happen. You should plan better. I put it in an envelope, addressed it to them, and placed a stamp on it. I would mail it in the morning. They would receive it in a few days, probably right around the time their phones stopped working. I leaned back in my chair, the first rays of dawn starting to peek through my window. I wasn't the dutiful, downtrodden son anymore. I wasn't their safety net. I was just a man who had finally learned to value himself. The board was cleared. A new game was about to begin. The next morning, I woke up feeling a strange sense of emptiness. It wasn't a bad feeling. It was the quiet emptiness of a space that has finally been cleared of clutter. For the first time in years, the background hum of anxiety about my family was gone. In its place, there was just silence. My first call was to Chloe. I told her everything. The party, the laptop, the cold calm, the night of 1,000 clicks. She was silent on the other end of the line for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Good," she said simply. "It's about damn time, Liam. I'm proud of you." Hearing those words, "I'm proud of you," from someone who actually meant them, almost broke me. It was all I had ever wanted from my parents, and I had to get it from a friend after an act of war. "What now?" she asked. "Now I finished the game," I said, a new energy surging through me. "I pour everything I have into it." "We finished the game," she corrected me. "I'm on my way over. We'll rebuild the lost day's work and make it even better." As I hung up, my computer chimed with a new email notification. My heart jumped, thinking it was a message from my family, but the sender's name was David Sterling. The subject line read, "Your project, Meridian Cycle." David Sterling was a legend in the indie game publishing world. He was the executive producer at Arcadian Games, one of the most respected publishers out there. Getting an email from him was like a garage band getting a call from a major record label. My hands shook as I opened it. "Mr. Johnson, my team and I have been following your work for some time now, since your first award-winning title. We came across the development blog for your current project, Meridian Cycle, and we are incredibly impressed with the scope and artistic vision. The world you're building is compelling. We believe this project has significant potential. I would like to schedule a meeting with you at your earliest convenience to discuss a potential publishing partnership. We see a very bright future for this title. Best, David Sterling." I read the email 3 times. A publishing partnership. From Arcadian Games. This was it. This was the dream. It was the kind of validation I had stopped even hoping for. The timing was almost poetic. On the very day I had severed ties with a family that saw my work as a joke and a piggy bank, the rest of the world that mattered, was reaching out to tell me that my work was important. I looked at the email, at the promise of a future I would build on my own terms. And I looked at the envelope on my desk, the one containing the note for my parents. One represented the future. The other represented the closing of a painful past. The dread was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left was a steely resolve. Let them come, I thought. Let them rage. They have no idea how powerless they are now. They thought they had destroyed my world, but they had just cleared the way for a new one to be born. The first sign of the apocalypse came 48 hours later. A text from my cousin Kevin. "Dude, your mom is freaking out. Said her phone's not working. What's going on?" I ignored it. An hour later, another one. "Okay. Now your dad is calling me from a weird number. Something about the internet being down? They're blaming you. I set my phone to do not disturb and got back to work. Chloe and I were in the zone, rebuilding the lost code, and the game was looking better than ever. The storm truly broke on the fourth day. It was a barrage of voicemails, all from my mother, left from my aunt's phone. The first one was confused. The second was angry. The third was hysterical. The fourth was a summons. "Liam Johnson, you will be at your Aunt Carol's house tomorrow at noon," she said, her voice dripping with an authority she no longer possessed. "The whole family is going to be there. We are going to discuss this behavior of yours." It wasn't an invitation. It was a subpoena for my own trial. Chloe was dead set against me going. "It's a trap, Liam. They're just going to gang up on you." "I know," I said, a grim smile on my face. "But I have to go. I need to do this face to face. I need to close this chapter for good. And besides," I added, tapping a manila folder on my desk, "I'm coming prepared." Walking into my Aunt Carol's house felt like walking into an arena. They were all there. My parents, front and center on the couch, looking like twin thunderclouds. My brother Ethan, leaning against the fireplace, trying to look bored but failing to hide the tension in his jaw. Aunt Carol stood by my mother's side, playing the role of supportive handmaiden. My uncle, my cousins, the same silent jury from the party, were scattered around the room. The air was thick with righteous indignation. "There he is," my father boomed as I walked in. "The ungrateful son. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I think so," I said calmly, remaining standing. I wasn't going to sit and make myself comfortable. This wasn't a visit. I stopped paying for things that I have no legal obligation to pay for. "Your mother couldn't call 911 if she had a heart attack," Aunt Carol screeched. "Her phone is dead. She could use your phone, Aunt Carol. Or a neighbor's. A lack of convenience is not a life-threatening emergency," I replied, my voice level. "The mortgage payment bounced, Liam," my mother said, her voice trembling with manufactured fragility. "The bank called. They used the word foreclosure. They said we might need a lawyer." "That does sound serious," I said, my face a mask of detached concern. "You should probably plan for that." This was the moment my cousin Kevin, the one who had texted me, decided to step in. He'd always been a bit of a weasel, constantly trying to play both sides. "Come on, Liam," he said, trying to sound like a reasonable peacemaker. "This is getting out of hand. We're family. Just turn everything back on. Apologize to your mom and dad, and we can all move past this. You should help them. It's the right thing to do." I turned my gaze to him. This was the betrayal I hadn't seen coming, but perhaps should have. He wasn't a peacemaker. He was their pawn. I later found out he'd been promised a small loan from my parents' expected windfall to start his own business. The treachery was layered deep in this family. "The right thing to do?" I repeated, my voice dangerously soft. "That's a very interesting choice of words, Kevin." "He's right." Ethan finally spoke up, pushing himself off the mantelpiece. "You're acting like a child. You got your feelings hurt over a stupid laptop, so you're trying to ruin their lives. Grow up. Give them the money for the coffee shop and stop all this nonsense." "The money," I said, nodding slowly. "Yes, let's talk about the money. The $139,000. Let's talk about the coffee shop." I let the words hang in the air. A flicker of panic crossed my mother's face. Ethan stiffened. They knew. They knew I was off script. The trial they had prepared for was about to be hijacked by the defendant. And I was about to call my own surprise witness to the stand. I held the silence for a moment longer, letting the tension in the room build until it was almost a physical presence. Every eye was on me. They thought I was cornered, that this was my final, desperate deflection. They had no idea I was holding the detonator. "You're all right," I said, my voice resonating in the quiet room. "A family should be honest with each other. So let's be honest. Let's talk about why you really need $139,000. I looked directly at my father. "It's not for a coffee shop, is it, Dad? There is no franchise. There is no can't-miss opportunity in an office building lobby. Robert's face went from red to a pale, blotchy white. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I think you do, I said. I opened the manila folder I'd been holding. The contents were mostly for show, but the effect was immediate. They saw it and assumed I had concrete proof, legal documents. The panic in their eyes intensified. I did some digging after you all launched your little pressure campaign, I lied smoothly. It's amazing what you can find out when you start asking questions. For example, when you ask about new coffee shop franchises, but the company says they have no plans for this city. Or when you start wondering why a successful vice president of finance like Ethan still has his phone on his parents' family plan. A plan paid for by his younger brother. I shifted my gaze to Ethan. He was frozen, his face a mask of stone-cold terror. It's a lot of pressure, isn't it, Ethan? Keeping up appearances. The fancy suits, the expensive dinners, the trips. It must be hard to maintain that lifestyle on your actual salary, which, after a little research, seems to be a lot less vice president and a lot more junior analyst. You shut your mouth, Ethan hissed, taking a step forward. Where did the money go, Ethan? I pressed on, my voice like a surgeon's scalpel. Did it go into a 401k? A college fund for your future kids? Or did it go to a bookie named Silas? Did it go to cover your losses from the online poker tables? The room was utterly silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick shag carpet. The $139,000 isn't for a business, I announced to the entire room. It's to pay off Ethan's gambling debts. A massive debt to some very unpleasant people who are threatening to expose him, to ruin the family's precious reputation. It's not an investment. It's a bailout. A desperate, pathetic attempt to cover up the fact that the golden child is a complete and utter fraud. Eleanor let out a strangled gasp. Aunt Carol looked like she had seen a ghost. You lied to me, I said, my voice low and shaking with the force of my contained rage. All of you. You were going to let me hand over my life savings. Not for a dream, but to clean up his mess. You were going to sacrifice my future to protect his. I turned back to my parents. And you? I said, pointing a finger at my father. You didn't drop my laptop by accident. You did it on purpose. You saw my refusal as the ultimate betrayal, so you tried to destroy the one thing that mattered to me. You tried to cripple me, to make me dependent and desperate enough to come crawling back. You didn't want a son. You wanted a hostage. The truth, raw and ugly, was finally out in the open. The carefully constructed facade of the perfect family had been shattered into a million pieces. And in that moment of stunned silence, I delivered the final blow. You know, it's funny, I said, a small cold smile touching my lips. You destroyed my laptop to stop me from working. But the day after, I got an email from David Sterling at Arcadian Games. They're one of the biggest indie publishers in the world. We have a meeting next week to discuss a publishing deal for Meridian Cycle. A deal that will likely include a significant advance. An advance that will make $139,000 look like pocket change. I paused, letting the weight of my success, a success achieved in spite of them, sink in. You tried to ruin me, I finished, my voice ringing with finality. But all you did was give me the freedom I needed to succeed without you. So thank you. Thank you for showing me exactly who you are. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my own life. Thank you for sticking with me this far, you're awesome. If you're still here, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you made it this far with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The aftermath of a bomb is not noise. It's a deafening silence. The air in the room was thick with the dust and debris of my revelations. No one moved. No one spoke. They just stared, their faces a gallery of shock, shame, and disbelief. Ethan was the first to break. He didn't explode in anger. He just crumpled. He sank into a nearby armchair, burying his face in his hands. The arrogant mask was gone, replaced by the pathetic reality of a man who had been exposed. My mother, Eleanor, looked at me, her eyes wide with a desperate, pleading look. She opened her mouth to speak, probably to spin another lie, another justification, but no words came out. For the first time in her life, the master manipulator was speechless. My father, Robert, just stared at the floor. The blustering, entitled patriarch had vanished. In his place was just a small old man who had been caught in a pathetic, cruel act. And then, a voice came from the corner of the room. It was my Uncle Mark, Robert's younger brother. A quiet man who I rarely ever saw speak at family functions. He had been at the party. He had seen everything. "He's right, Robert," Mark said, his voice quiet but firm. "I saw you. It wasn't an accident. You looked right at the boy. You did it on purpose. That was it. The final nail in the coffin. A confession from an eyewitness, from his own blood. It wasn't just my word against theirs anymore. The truth had been verified. This single, quiet statement of fact did what all my shouting could not have achieved. It broke the spell of family loyalty. I saw the looks on the faces of my other cousins and my aunt. The indignation was gone, replaced by a dawning look of disgust. They weren't looking at me as the villain anymore. They were looking at my parents and my brother. The family meeting was over. People started to leave one by one. They muttered quiet, awkward goodbyes, unable to look me or my parents in the eye. They had come for a public shaming and had instead witnessed a public execution. My cousin Kevin scurried out without a word, his face pale. Aunt Carol, for once, had nothing to say. She just quietly guided my sobbing mother toward the kitchen. Soon, the room was empty except for me, my father, and my brother. The silence that remained was heavier, more profound than before. It was the silence of a family that had been irrevocably broken. There was nothing left to say. There were no apologies that could fix this. There were no excuses that could cover the sheer, calculated malice of what they had done. It was all out in the open, ugly and undeniable. The implosion was complete. I stood there for a moment, looking at the wreckage of my family. My father was still staring at the floor, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Ethan hadn't moved, his face still buried in his hands. I could have yelled. I could have listed every single grievance from the past 20 years. I could have demanded an apology that I knew would be hollow and meaningless. But I felt nothing but a vast, weary emptiness. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind only the cold ashes of resolution. I walked over to the door. My movement seemed to startle my father out of his stupor. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine for the first time since the revelation. "Liam," he started, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Wait." I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, but I didn't turn around. "What you said about the money, we were just trying to protect him." I finished the sentence for him, my voice devoid of emotion. By destroying me? Was that the plan? To ruin one son to save the other? Was there ever a version of this where you even considered what was best for me? He had no answer. There was no answer. "This is the last time we will have this conversation," I said, my voice as steady as steel. "This is the last time I will stand in this room. The auto payments are off. The phone lines are canceled. The insurance is terminated. Nothing is being turned back on. Ever." I finally turned to face them, to make sure they saw the finality in my eyes. "You need to figure out how to solve your own problems now. Ethan, you need to face the consequences of your actions. Dad, you need to get a job. Mom, you need to stop enabling this disaster. Your lives are your own responsibility now. I am no longer your safety net. I am no longer your son in any way that matters." Ethan looked up at me then, his face stained with tears. "Liam, please." "Please what, Ethan?" I asked. "Please give you the money so you can do this all over again in a few years? Please let you all continue to treat me like dirt? No. The bank of Liam is closed. Permanently." I looked from my brother's broken face to my father's empty one. There was no remorse there. I could see it. There was only regret at being caught. "Goodbye," I said, and I walked out the door. I didn't slam it. I closed it gently behind me. I walked down the driveway, got into my car and didn't look back. The sun was bright. The sky was clear. It felt like the first day of the rest of my life. I wasn't leaving anything behind. I was walking toward everything. 6 months can feel like a lifetime. The person who walked out of Aunt Carol's house that day felt like a stranger to me now. A ghost from a past life. The meeting with David Sterling and Arcadian Games had been a whirlwind. I walked in with my prototype, my vision, and a newfound confidence that came from having nothing left to lose. They saw the passion. They saw the potential. They didn't just offer me a publishing deal. They offered me a partnership. They gave me a generous advance. More than enough to live on for years and to hire a small team. Chloe became my official co-director. We moved out of our cramped office and into a proper studio space downtown. We hired a talented artist and a brilliant sound designer. Meridian Cycle was no longer just my project. It was our project. The energy was electric. Coming into work every day was a joy. We were building something real, something beautiful, and we were doing it on our own terms. The game's demo, which we released at a major online gaming festival, was a massive hit. The press called it stunningly ambitious and a breathtaking new world. Our community Discord server exploded with thousands of new fans, people from all over the world who were genuinely excited about the story we were telling. For the first time, I felt seen, truly seen. The validation I had craved from my family for decades was being given to me freely and enthusiastically by total strangers. It was a strange and wonderful feeling. My personal life had blossomed, too. Without the constant financial drain and emotional stress, I felt lighter. I had more energy. I started working out. I reconnected with old friends who had drifted away during the years I was too consumed by work and family drama. I was building a new family, one forged in friendship and mutual respect, not guilt and obligation. Chloe and I and our small team would often go out for dinner after a long week, celebrating our small victories. We'd laugh until our sides hurt. It was simple. It was healthy. It was everything my real family never was. I hadn't heard a single word from my parents or my brother. After I walked out that day, I blocked all their numbers. I blocked the numbers of any relative who had acted as their flying monkey. The silence was profound. It was a clean break. Sometimes, late at night, a pang of sadness would hit me. Not for the people they were, but for the family I wished they had been. A family that celebrated my successes, that supported my dreams without a price tag attached. But the feeling would pass. It was a phantom limb, an ache for something that was never really there. I was thriving. I was happy. I was free. The world they had tried to keep small and confined to their needs had opened up into something vast and full of possibility. I was finally the main character in my own story. While my world was expanding, theirs was collapsing. I didn't seek out the information, but news travels in the way it always does in families, through the cracks. My Uncle Mark would call me every month or so, just to check in. He never offered information unless I asked. But one day, my curiosity got the better of me. "How are they?" I asked, the question feeling strange on my tongue. Mark sighed on the other end of the line. "It's been hard, Liam. It's been a reckoning." He told me they had lost the house. They couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments, and no bank would refinance for them given my father's credit history. They sold it for a loss before the bank could foreclose, and moved into a small, 2-bedroom rental apartment in a less desirable part of town. The beautiful home I had spent years paying for was gone. My father, Robert, had been forced to face a reality he had avoided for 40 years. He had to get a real job. He was now working as an overnight security guard at a warehouse. The man who had mocked my little computer games was spending his nights walking empty corridors, checking doors. There was no glory in it, no get-rich-quick scheme, just a paycheck. Ethan's fall from grace had been even more dramatic. The people he owed money to hadn't been bluffing. When the payment deadline passed, they did exactly what they'd threatened to do. They sent an anonymous email to his company's HR department, detailing his gambling addiction and his massive debts. He was fired within the week for violating the company's code of conduct. The golden child had lost his shine. Mark told me Ethan had finally hit rock bottom and had checked himself into a support group for gambling addiction. He was working a retail job to start paying off his debts, one small paycheck at a time. It wasn't a story of triumph for me. It was just a story of consequences. Actions have reactions. The universe, in its own slow, methodical way, balances the books. Then, about a week after that call, a letter arrived. It was addressed in my mother's handwriting. I almost threw it away, but again, curiosity won. I opened it. It wasn't an apology. I knew better than to expect one. It was something different. It was a rambling, 2-page explanation. She wrote about her own upbringing, about the intense pressure she felt to maintain a perfect image for her friends and neighbors. She talked about how Ethan's success was, in her mind, her success, and his failure was her failure. I know what we did was wrong, she wrote, but I was so afraid. I was terrified of the shame of what people would say. The idea of our friends finding out about Ethan, about a potential social divorce from everyone we knew. It felt like the end of the world. I thought if we could just get the money, we could patch the hole and no one would ever know. I sacrificed you, my own son, for my pride, and I have to live with that. It wasn't an excuse. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It was a confession. For the first time, she was being honest, not about what they did, but why they did it. It didn't change anything. It didn't erase the years of neglect or the final, cruel betrayal. But it gave the monster a face. The monster wasn't just greed. It was fear. A deep, pathetic, all-consuming fear of what the neighbors would think. I folded the letter and put it away. It didn't make me want to call her. It didn't make me want to see them. But it did something unexpected. It allowed a tiny sliver of pity to enter my heart. Not for their situation, but for the small, sad lives they had chosen to live, governed by fear and appearances. I had escaped that prison, and I would never, ever go back. 2 years have passed since I walked out of that house for the last time. Meridian Cycle launched to critical acclaim and commercial success that exceeded all our wildest dreams. We sold over 1 million copies in the first year. Last month, we sold the television rights to a major streaming service. My life is completely unrecognizable from what it was. I have a home that is my own, a career that I love, and a circle of friends who are my true family. I never spoke to my parents or my brother again. The letter was the last communication I ever received. I hear snippets about them from time to time through Uncle Mark. They're surviving. They're living with the choices they made. The security guard job, the retail job, the small apartment. That is their reality now. I don't hate them anymore. Hate is a fire that consumes you from the inside out, and I have too much to live for to let that fire burn. What I feel now is a distant, quiet sadness. A sadness for the family that could have been, for the love that should have been unconditional but came with a price I was no longer willing to pay. Sometimes I stand at the window of my new office, looking out at the city skyline, and I think about that day at the pool. I think about the splash, the smirk, and the cold calm that followed. It was a terrible day. It was the day my family died. But it was also the day I was born. I learned the hardest lesson of my life that day. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones holding you back. And sometimes, the most powerful act of love you can perform is for yourself. The act of walking away. You have to be willing to destroy the life you have to build the life you deserve. My name is Liam, and this was my story of how I finally learned to press the button and choose myself. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to make a difficult choice to protect your own well-being? I'd be honored if you'd share your thoughts in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Your support truly means the world.